Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that's a bit loud. I see myself going into the red there. No, it's good now. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And feeling pretty good. I just did a 2-day water fast. Tremendous peace in fasting. I recommend it to all of you, if you can. I'm always... My son was up here one time, and I was in a long fast. I was on day 8 or day 9, and he said, "Yeah, you can only do these long fasts because you live up here. I don't think you'd have the energy or the psychic fortitude to go out on the subway and go to an office and sit under fluorescent lights and be fasting for 12 days. I said, yeah, you're right. And it made me realize something. How everything I've created for myself up here is a kind of an opportunity. And it requires discipline to fulfill the potential of this place, but it's a place where you can really, really get into some deep, deep healing, deep introspection, deep meditation, and you can do things like fast, which I think is a absolutely phenomenal habit, by the way. Had kind of a wonderful day today. Had a little bit of insomnia last night, which is strange because I didn't eat. I ate today. I ate around 5 o'clock. I won't eat tomorrow. I'm going to do this intermittent fasting for a while. I think it's very good for your health when you get to a certain age. I think food and your stomach cause all the health problems beyond like 55 years old, except for genetic stuff. Yeah, so tonight I want to do a podcast for a friend of the show. Her name is Patty, and she lives in Arizona. And the last podcast I did, she was very intrigued by the last 30 minutes where I got into a little bit about imagination. And so tonight I wanted to do a fuller expose on imagination. It has to be one of the most misused words or misunderstood words. It's a word people use all the time. But generally when people use the word imagination, it's in a derisive way. It's to suggest a dislocation from reality. It's to suggest a mental imbalance, a cognitive rift. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know that expression, you say you saw something and somebody say, if it's fantastical, hey, I was out hunting and I saw Bigfoot. Oh, it was probably just your imagination. And there's always that word just there. Just your imagination. That never ceases to amaze me because one of the things that you come to hold in the highest regard when you go within is the imagination. Okay, so when you listen to people talk about consciousness journeys, they're talking about imagination. Okay, that's what they're talking about. When Courtney Brown talks about remote viewing, he's talking about imagination. Okay, the place those images are seen in the remote viewing are in the front of the head, in the forehead, just above the nose bridge. between the eyebrows, the spiritual eye. Well, it's not imagination, Bruce. They were actually there. They can extract details from the physical terrain and report accurately on what they saw. And then when it's physically surveilled, what they saw is actually there. So it's not imagination, Bruce. Really? So they saw it with their eyes? Okay, so they saw it with the imagination. The images. Imagination. Yeah. Fascinating word. Spinning off of image, of course. I think maybe we should take a look. This is a word we should look up here on the Telemancer Review. Imagination, definition. And it's a noun. This is from Oxford Languages, which I generally recommend. And it's the faculty or action of forming new ideas, or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. That's a good definition. Now, usually I shit on stuff when I look it up on my show. That's actually a very good definition. I'm impressed. And then it gets into derivative expressions, okay? Derivative, or the way popular language and utility will mutate a word over time. That's what we're talking about, okay, when we talk about derivations. So they get into the ability of the mind to be creative or resourceful. Technology gives workers the chance to use their imagination. Really? Isn't that interesting? Technology is going to give us the opportunity to use our imagination. And another derivative definition is the part of the mind that imagines things. A girl who existed only in my imagination. Okay. Very important. And very, very misunderstood word, in my opinion. Okay. Very important and very misunderstood word, in my opinion. Now I'm going to tell you what the imagination really is. And it's explained in a number of places all over the world. You just don't know it's being explained to you because they use an invented language or a dead language to explain it. But when internal experience begins to happen to you in the contemplative state, the definition of illumination, or the definition of imagination written anywhere, in any coded gibberish, becomes illuminated to you. You know what they're talking about. So imagine somebody is describing pasta, but they're not saying pasta. They're not saying flour, water, and eggs and salt, rolled and then rolled out and then cut into thin strands and then boiled, and then an Alfredo sauce is placed on it, or a tomato sauce. They're describing something that is pasta, but they're doing so in a language you don't understand, and you've never seen pasta. Okay, so number one, you've never seen pasta. You don't know what it is. You don't have a reference point. And number two, it's being described in a foreign idiom. in a couched or hidden way that can't be understood unless first you know what pasta is, and then you've prepared pasta, and that you've eaten pasta. Okay? It's the same thing with imagination. They're explaining it in the Upanishads. They're explaining it in the Bhagavad Gita. They're explaining it in the Tao Te Ching. They're all massive expositions on the imagination. Christ is talking very much about the imagination in the Gospels. Okay? Once you realize what it is, it's everywhere. It's just hidden everywhere. In our poetry, in our scripture, in the occult codes. It's everywhere. Now, the big thing going on in the world now is making the imagination manifest. Okay? That's where technology is at now. Okay? So stage 1 was creating energy from matter. That was fission and fusion. We did that at the beginning of the 20th century. Tested it out on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and a number of tests in the desert in the United States. And that's what it was. Okay? It was creating energy from matter. Phase 2, according to what John Kelly and Edward Dee were told by the Enochian angels, who had them swap wives. Stage 2 is to create matter from energy. Okay? So any creative process goes backwards or forwards. Okay? They can usually interchange them. And I say that any creative process or universal process, and this adheres to the law of what? Of what? You know. You got it. Say it. The law of duality. Man, woman, night, day, hot, cold, north, south, east, west. Inner space, outer space, imagination, reality. They're all forms of duality. All dualities collapse into one thing in the contemplative journey. Fucking Nordics aren't going to tell you that. I'll tell you that right now. I don't think they know themselves. The fucking Palladians aren't going to tell you that. I don't think they know themselves. I should stop being so critical. It doesn't help anything. I just sound like some cranky Scotsman living in the lowlands in a damp stone house, and his wife left him. I should stop bitching about shit. Yeah. So usually when I fast, I do a THC oil, and I'm stoned out of my mind. I do it a couple times a year. I really didn't enjoy it that much the last time. I know it's medicine, and you know, cod liver oil, take your medicine. THC oil is really good. Again, you need the time. I mean, how many people have time the way I have time? Not many. Not many. I mean, and then if you did have the kind of time I had, like if you were in a monastery somewhere, you were a Trappist or a Franciscan or a Jesuit recluse or a rabbinical hermit supported by the World Jewry, or, you know, some kind of Muslim Sufi recluse supported by the World Islamic Foundation, then you'd have to live by their rules. I'm out here just making it all up on my own. But I do get very clear and very peaceful when I'm fasting. Now, I've eaten already. I had just a little bit of food, though. But when you fast for 2 days, just water, when you eat, you're so full, it's unbelievable. I had a little bit of yucca fried in coconut oil and 2 fried eggs on top of it. And I feel like I just walked out a Mandarin buffet. And beat the fattest guy in the place in an undeclared eating contest. And really, my plate of food was a tiny little plate of food, because your stomach contracts when you're fasting. I get very lucid when I'm fasting. That's why I'm so funny and sharp tonight, in case you hadn't noticed, in case you needed to be told. So, yeah, so imagination it's a really important thing, okay? And by the way, I think being able to explain aspects of consciousness like this in common language is a demonstration of true knowledge by experience. You know, I really, I don't like very much the people who invoke a lot of old language from dusty old manuscripts. My neighbor across the mountain does that, Shunyamurti. You know, talk about some yogic manuscript from 1490 or something like that. Or, you know, he'll use Sanskrit terminology and then try to explain it in English. You don't need anything but simple language to explain consciousness and the journey to what we'll call unity consciousness. Okay, you don't, if you really know what you're talking about, you could explain it in the simplest of languages, which is your first clue they really don't know what they're talking about. Okay? Not trying to pick on anybody. I'm not trying to say that my neighbor across the mountain is not an enlightened individual. I think he very well might be. I think he is. I think the reference to the old stuff and the book learning is just, you know, lingering ego, which he says he's dissolved. You know, which apparently not, right? And just the desire to make yourself sound legitimate, right? But I promise you, I'm going to explain it to you tonight in a way that you've never had it explained to you before. Okay? And imagination that's at the very center of it all. Let's start with a little poetry. So here we go. Another Weeping Woman by Wallace Stevens. Pour the unhappiness out from your too bitter heart, which grieving will not sweeten. Poison grows in this dark. It is in the water of tears. Its black blooms rise. The magnificent cause of being, the imagination, the one reality in this imagined world leaves you with him for whom no fantasy moves, and you are pierced by a death. Unbelievably beautiful poem. Unbelievably beautiful. And so that is one of the truest lines I've ever read. Imagination is the one reality in this imagined world. And that's what made Stevens. All right, so let's get into this. What is the imagination really, okay, from my perspective as a contemplative? Okay, first of all, anything that is dreamed is real. Okay? It's real. And just because it's not physically manifest doesn't mean that it's not real. There are many things which do not physically manifest which are real. Right? So anything that's dreamed is real. And anything that is dreamed can become real. Anything that is dreamed is real. And anything that is dreamed can become real. So it's first real inside you. And it can become real by manifesting or coming into the world. This is the principle of guarding your thoughts. This is the principle of mental fasting and guarding the gates of your consciousness, which is a portal. Remember the podcasts on agency? The womb inseminated by Solomon? That everything that happens on this dimension happens through human agency because we are the stewards and we are the highest manifest consciousness on the planet. Visibly anyways. I mean, there may be things inside the earth that declare themselves sometime in the future. But I'd say that we're it. Okay? We're it. So anything that is dreamed is real, and anything that is dreamed can become real. And if you understand that, you understand that grasping at the unreal is therefore natural human behavior. You follow that? Okay. So taking control of imagination is taking control of reality. You know, the last podcast I did, I gave the example of getting a religious dogma templated on your consciousness. The rabbis and the vicars and the priests and the imams stealing your soul. That's really kind of what they're doing, really. Right? They're taking control of your imagination. They're telling you what you can dream. And freedom is not just about physical movement. You know, there's too much of this delinquent idea of freedom in the West. Two adult men and two adult consenting men want to practice sodomy in a park in Montreal at midnight. Why can't we be free? Because it's disgusting and offensive to people who don't enjoy that. That's why, you fucking moron. All right, that's just the big distraction. You understand? It's just a big, huge distraction, big load of bullshit. Freedom is what you can do. It's not what you can do, it's what you can think. It's what you can perceive, what you can dream. That's true freedom. And culture becomes the first prison for the person seeking true freedom. Now, depending on the maturation of the soul, the incarnation, some people are very comfortable in culture. They have karma to work out in culture. They have competitions to win in culture. They have titles to gain in culture. They have children to raise in this culture. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But when you want true freedom, when you want true liberation, you will break the walnut shell of culture. Understanding that it should be left preserved for other people who need the cultural womb to exist through a series of incarnations. Remember, not everybody's equal. You know, people often forget this. I don't know why, but they just do. Not everybody's equal. Not everybody's well, everybody is equal outside of time. A soul is a soul. But we're all at different stages of growth and progression in our journey back to the ocean of love and mercy. Okay? Some people like culture, like it quite a bit. Now, this is very important, so there's going to be a lot of repetition, and this is going to be a two-parter. Okay? A lot of repetition, so here we go again. Anything that is dreamed is real. Anything that is dreamed can become real. Grasping at the unreal is therefore natural human behavior. Taking control of imagination is therefore taking control of reality. And reality we know not to be ours. It's not ours, reality. We know that. But we're always trying to take control of it. It's human nature. Okay? Until you outgrow it and you can truly surrender. But true surrender is very few people. Very few people get to a state of true surrender in their life. It's very difficult. I don't mean to sound discouraging. Try your best. But it's hard, man. It's hard. Reality is not ours. But we also know that reality is holding something from us. We know this somehow. I don't know how, but we just know this. It's baked into us, right? It's our unconscious self. It's our higher self. We know reality is holding something back from us. It could be that we haven't learned to ask for it. Most questions you ask the Creator will be answered. And the ones that aren't answered because it might be destructive for you to get the answer at that particular juncture. Imagination, the one reality in this imagined world. So most things you ask of creation or the Creator will be given to you. They will be answered. Generally, if they're of a constructive nature for your unfoldment, right? Everything generally gets what it needs in the world. Okay? Everything gets what it needs. And so, well, there's a lot of blue morpho butterflies up here. You don't see them every day. I might see one or two a month. But 99.9% of the human race never sees a blue morpho butterfly in their whole life. And why are they here? Because it's a perfect place for them. Because creation doesn't make any mistakes. So it allows blue morpho butterflies to come from the caterpillars that make them. And it created an environment where they can live in the Talamanca Mountains. That's why. Okay? The same butterfly could not survive in Canada. It's too cold. Okay? And it's the same thing with us. We're placed into the environment where we can grow the best. And everything going on in our lives is a product of what we dreamed before we came into this life. It's like a continuation. It's what we wanted to do. Now, when you get it a little bit more advanced, you have a lot more freedom and movement. You can go anywhere, really. I rewatched a few days ago. I rewatched a great 1993 Bernardo Bertolucci movie called The Little Buddha, with Bridget Fonda and Chris Isaak and Keanu Reeves as the Buddha. Bernardo Bertolucci is an epic Italian filmmaker. You might know him from The Last Emperor, Last Emperor of China, and a fantastic movie. And so is The Little Buddha. Not highly rated. It's only about like a 6.5 on IMDb. But if you're curious about Buddhism, it's a 9 out of 10 movie. Absolutely fascinating. Anyways, the reason I bring it up is that the advanced Rinpoches can go wherever they want. They can reincarnate wherever they want. So, they can have a lifetime in Dharamsala in India, die when they're 85, and then pop over to the West and, be born in Seattle if they want, in a completely different culture and language. But most of us, we end up incarnating back into what we need to finish or what we started and didn't finish, okay? But when you get to service incarnation, like the Buddhists, then you can move around a bit more, okay? So taking control of imagination is taking control of reality. And reality we know not to be ours. But we know also that reality is holding something from us, or perhaps we have not learned to ask for it, or how to ask for it. Because after all, longing forms questions. And this is the dilemma of imagination. Very poetic tonight. I wrote this, by the way, this essay I'm reading you. I wrote this in like 1991 in my apartment in Taiwan. I was saturated with Tao. This was the height of my immersion in Taoism. I was reading all of the Taoist sacred texts. I had an esoteric Buddhist master friend. I could go over to his house and have tea. He was also a rotating professor in microwave physics, I believe, or microwave engineering at Princeton University. He spoke English. And then I had another friend who was a master of a northern style of Tai Chi Chuan and a Taoist master. And I had all of the seminal Taoist texts in English translation in my room. I can't even begin to tell you what a geek I was in my 20s, my 30s. This is probably the coolest I've ever been in my 50s. I've been a geek my whole life, just a total geek. So really this is a kind of a Taoist sutra. And the language is written in a very sharp and very tight way so that there's a lot of weight in every line. And you have to think about it quite a bit. And that's the way the Tao Te Ching is written. And all of the subordinate books as well, the inner chapters by Zhuangzi, and then the supporting material by Lietzu, Huatzu, and Hutsu. Okay, so a whole library of information that forms the canon of Taoism. And Taoism is a functioning spiritual path to this day. So we know that we're not whole, because where there is fear, there is want. We know we're not whole, because where there is fear, there is want. And want is suffering. To want something is a form of suffering. I realize I'm paraphrasing the Buddhists there. Desire is the source of all suffering. But look at it through the lens of my theory of imagination here. Look at it through that lens. Now, creation longs for us, and we long for creation. Creation longs for us, and we long for creation. It just is the way it is. Therefore, longing is natural, and creation too is suffering, because creation too is growing. Now, longing is the reason of imagination and the reason for imagination. And yet there's absolutely no reason in imagination. Because the thing that cannot see beyond itself cannot reason. And the imagination is almost always brought to life by what we want. You ever notice that? That your utility of imagination is almost always rooted in what you want. Okay? I'm telling you, imagination is a doorway. It's a portal to knowledge, to experience, to other dimensions, to all kinds of things. And how do we as human beings use it? We torture ourselves with images of things that we want. Right? Advertising has made a culturally perverse art form out of this, inserting images into our imagination and making us want something. But it's a very important thing to note. And it's a very important thing to be honest about yourself with. Okay? And to understand consciousness and to understand self-honesty is absolutely required. Rigorous self-honesty. You can't really be harboring too many illusions. You have to be honest. Okay? Prerequisite for any growth in consciousness, you have to be honest. Don't lie to yourself. Don't judge yourself. Don't condemn yourself. Don't think negatively of yourself, no matter what you've done. But don't lie to yourself. Okay, so the normal state of imagination is its utility is evoked when we want something. I guess you could say there's nothing wrong with that, but for spiritual development, you have to repurpose the imagination. Okay? Also puts a whole new slant on the notion of desire and manifestation. All of these things, they're just all part of the imaginative structure. Okay? The images in our head. Amazing when you think about it, right? Very few people ever really stop and consider imagination. It's an amazing thing, truly an amazing thing. I think that's enough for tonight. I'm going to do a short one, and I'm going to do this thesis on imagination over several parts. It's very intense, you know. I think a shorter podcast is better. Digest everything that's been said. Okay, I'll go over it one more time where we are in the material so far. Anything that is dreamed is real. Anything that is dreamed can become real. Grasping at the unreal is therefore natural human behavior. Taking control of imagination is therefore taking control of reality. And reality we know not to be ours. But we know also that reality is holding something from us, or perhaps we have not learned to ask for it, or how to ask for it. Because after all, longing forms questions. This is the dilemma. We know that we are not whole because where there is fear, there is want, and want is suffering. Creation longs for us, and we long for creation. Therefore, longing is natural, and the creation too is suffering, because creation too is growing. Okay, so you have to be self-honest to understand what I'm saying. Okay. Oh, but I don't have any fear, therefore I don't have any want. I don't know what Bruce is talking about. Really? You've truly and genuinely transcended the fear of dying. You know exactly what happens to you. No? Well, then you have a want. You want to know what happens when the body ends. It's, the Roy Batty questions from Blade Runner. Who am I? How long do I have? All of these sorts of things, which is why that was such an epic piece of cinema there, Roy Batty. Epic. All right, so maybe we'll end with that. Tears in the Rain.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the 10-Hauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
Kind of beautiful, eh? Anyways, this has been Patty's podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald for the Talamanca Review, signing off. And tomorrow night we'll do Imagination and Reality Part 2.